because I have
Thank
that
you.
ability now. It's not accidentally shut off this time. Woo! Okay. Got that going. Share my screen. Bruce, would you like to lead us in? Captain's log, date 7 March 2023. Okay.
That was really good. I'd know the start date, but I don't.
All right. So last time we talked about we ended on the rocks and anchors and pushed that out to this next this next session. And what I promised you was a morning full of exciting, tantalizing tips and tricks and how to be nice to people. Not really nice, but how to manipulate them for their own good. Manipulate's a strong word, but hey, this is what we do. So we're going to go through quite a bit of stuff this morning, tips, tricks, and just some conversations about how to have good conversations, how to sort of trick people into being happy, even if they don't want to be, and how to help people feel more comfortable through change. Then we're going to look at those 4 values that you talked about and kind of blow those out a little bit and see how do we think we're going to do those things. So it's one thing to type them up or put them on a screen, one thing to hang them next to your office or your desk, but it's another thing to actually say, what does that mean? So, trust, what does that mean for us? How are we going to build that out? And then we'll dive into those rocks and anchor conversations and talk through those a little bit. Any questions, comments from last time before we get started? Lovely. Here's my agenda I put together that I already talked about. Now you've seen it with your own eyes. If you're a visual person, you're welcome. So today's class is full of videos. I was putting this together and I'm like, this is like those Fridays that they keep your kids in school, but the kids don't really need to be there and they just watch movies all day. Except for it's not going to be like that because you're going to learn something. Dang it, you're going to learn something. So I saw this really cool thing where you can share. I'm going to kind of guinea pig with you guys a little bit because there's a new thing you can do in Zoom where you can share your audio. Because I share these videos, but no one can ever really hear them very well. But then I saw a thing somewhere that said, share sound. Okay, I'm going to play this and see what happens.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come.
Oops, I accidentally paused it. I was turning the volume up. Can you guys hear it since I accidentally paused it?
Yep.
Okay, you can hear it okay? All right.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Okay. Do I still sound the same? I don't sound like weird or anything, huh? Cool.
Nope.
Okay, so what do you think of my funny video?
That was maddening.
My first thought, because of course it was, a friend of mine said they were afraid of elevators, but they're taking steps to avoid them.
And it's still hamstringing them. Yeah, it's maddening to watch. And the funny thing is, we find ourselves on this accountability escalator and stuck on this accountability escalator a lot. And I know we already talked about the accountability model last time, so I won't belabor the point, but I wanted to share the video because I think it really does speak to when you watch somebody else be stuck on an accountability escalator or not holding themselves accountable for something, it's pretty easy to just go, oh my gosh, do the thing, take the step, do the thing. What are you doing? You're in your own way, right? I can't tell you how many times I have said this to people. You're in your own way, but that doesn't necessarily help that person get out of their own way. Also, we are on that accountability escalator and stuck there lots and lots and lots of times. And then, you know, what happens, somebody says they're going to come along and save us. And then they get busy, really, they get stuck on their own escalator, but they get busy doing other things and they don't help us. Then we're mad at that person. So thinking about the way I was thinking about this for you all is, if I've got a client and I can't get you the data. I can't get you the data if you're setting up a new client. Boy, I don't have time. Somebody won't give me the right stuff. Whatever their excuses are, you get frustrated. Somebody else comes in from your team and says, well, I can help you with that. They don't actually get it done. Then you're frustrated with them. You're frustrated with the client. So thinking about, I'm going to flip back up to this so you can see the whole thing here. Thinking about this accountability loop, how do you help other people make sure they're in this blue loop, recognizing, what is the issue, who needs to own what, and how do we move through it and take action? So a lot of times when somebody seems like they're, for lack of a better word, being useless and not doing their job, we just think, well, Thorny is just useless and that he's not going to be helpful. But we know that there are a lot of things going on for people in their own day-to-day. And whether they're, kind of being not good at their job or not being accountable or responsible, or if they really do just have things going on or somewhere in between, it doesn't matter, right? We can only manage what we're doing and how we're acting in that specific situation. So the first thing you can do with that accountability loop, if somebody's stuck on an escalator, including yourself, recognize what is the issue. Well, maybe it's snowing outside, and maybe it takes longer to get from place to place, and that is a truth for me. And so I don't, in my brain, no matter how hard I try, sometimes I can't plan for a long enough trip, even though I know it's snowing and I have to drive slower. So that, and it can be simple things like that, like actually being more intentional about planning out your day or planning out a conversation with someone. If I know that every time I talk to Joel, I'm going to be frustrated, well, plan out the conversation. Like you could have had the conversation with him a million times. Who cares? Write it down. What are the 7 bullet points that you have got to get through in that conversation and have them ready? So recognize what is the issue for you, or if you can kind of sift through what it might be for another person and help them through it. It makes a huge difference in getting people spun into this accountability loop, because then you're not trying to help them justify what the reasons that they're not going, things didn't get done. You're actually just helping them fix the problem. So it cuts out a whole section of conversation, typically when you're working through change. And it really cuts back on the emotional toll it takes on people. So that accountability escalator is just in case. It's a really lovely way for people who aren't, holding themselves accountable. You just send them that video and say, isn't this crazy? It's so dumb. Just walk up the stairs. You don't have to say any more, and they'll figure it out. So anyway, just that's one tip number one, trick number one. Find that accountability video. It's on YouTube, and never lose the link. It's also in this PowerPoint, which Brett or I will be sending to you, so you'll have it there. We talked a lot last time, sort of unintentionally, about our three brains, and non-complementary behavior. And I wanted to touch on this a little bit more deeply with some better images than the one I found on the internet. Okay, so as a refresher, there are three parts of your brain, and they work evolutionarily in order no matter what, unless you kind of know how to usurp that order. So whenever you have a new situation you find yourself in, the first thing is going to be the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain gets to say, we're either going to love this or we're going to hate it. We're going to either freak out or we're going to stick around and try and fight it. Then you've got your limbic system, and that says, well, let's assign some emotions to this. I'm going to stay and fight, but I'm really freaked out. And that's typically what happens for the people that you're working with in change. They're here for it, right? You hear, man, we're so excited. This, all the McLeod environment is going to drastically improve everything that we do. Everybody's on board. And then you might hear crickets for a while, or you start hitting these really strange walls. People are like, they're like, yay, we're excited. And then don't come in my office, or I'm not going to send you this email, or I don't have time to meet with you. And you're like, okay, well, you're paying for this. How can I help you? Oh, well, we're just really so busy. We're so busy. We can't implement the thing that makes us less nuts. Okay. So that's that limbic system, right? So at first their reptilian brain is running at it. Yes, let's do it. We're going to fight the good fight in this sense. We're going to take this on. It's going to be awesome. Then the limbic system says, well, this is pretty scary. There's some new stuff that we're trying to figure out here, and I don't know if I'm in for this. And then finally, here's a trivia. Do you know about how long it takes people to get comfortable with change on average?
3 months.
121 days.
More.
A year.
More.
Never.
2 years.
Oh, wow.
So, when a client implements McLeod software into their organization, you've got your decision makers who've probably been thinking about it for a couple years, or a year, or whatever, 6 months. So they're 6 months ahead of everybody else. Then they do their evaluation period. That takes, we'll call it 6 months, because they're going to be slow to make the decision. So they've had the information for a year. Then you start talking about data mapping and all blah, blah, the things. And so then that's another 6 months. So they're 18 months into this thing before really too many people know about it in the organization. Then it starts all over for those people. So before your real decision-making or logic brain, your prefrontal or neocortex gets a hold of information, it can be up to 2 years where your brain really starts to get a hold of it. 18 months probably, and then the 2 years is the, okay, well, it is what it is. I'm in or I'm out kind of thing. So reptilian brain, fight or flight, limbic system assigns all the emotions, all the heart feelings, and then your brain, your logic brain kicks in for a lot of people, 18 months to 2 years. So what you'll see, and I suppose you've experienced this with implementation, what you'll see is you'll have a couple people, typically not the people well, it depends. Probably not the people that you're working with right away in the organization, but you're gonna have a few people when you go to implement, they quit right away. Don't want this, not here for it. I've been working in an Excel spreadsheet my whole career. I'm not about to start with this new technology mumbo jumbo. My wife uses the internet, not me, kind of stuff. So you got a few people who are gonna quit right away. Then you'll have a few, and so that's like within the first month. Then you'll have a lull. So for the fourth month, that it's pretty quiet and sweet. You know, you got a couple of zingers that may be ready to retires or people who didn't really fit with the organization. They quit right away. Then from month 1 to 4, you've kind of got a quiet period in the sense that people are excited and there's a buzz and they're ready to see what this new thing is about. They know it means change, but nobody's really told them what that means yet. They've heard other people and other companies talk about, gee, cloud's awesome. We love it. So like, okay, it's going to be good for us. So between month 1 and month 4, you've got a good period of excited energy. Then while they're excited, they're still fact checking and I'm trying to understand what's going on. So if you don't manage your communication with the client very well, then in month 4, this emotional brain really gets a hold of things and says, we should be freaked out. This isn't working. I haven't heard from anybody. I can't give them what they need, whatever. And then this part where people might quit out here is, I mean, that's, 18 months to 2 years away. And the same can be true inside your company as you're building out new teams. So anytime you impose change on people, doesn't have to be a huge change. It's more obvious when it's a big change. But when you impose change on people, those are kind of the milestones that we see. Right away, some people are like, I'm out of here. About 4 to 6 months, if people are really freaked out, they might leave and then out into, 18 months or 2 years. Those are also kind of the trigger months where people who are really in it, or also if you do a great job communicating and everybody feels really good, those are kind of the milestone markers in time also that you really see behaviors change from, well, this is an exciting project to, oh, this is going to be really good for our business from a strategic perspective to, wow, I'm really glad that we did this, and sort of create some kind of disciples, if you will, of whatever that change decision was. So I put this one on here too, because it just it says it in a different way, which I think this is more, this one's a little bit more common, like makes sense, I guess, to me. So, the brainstem is love. So love or hate. If I hate it, I'm going to run away. The limbic system, that middle part of your brain, is really the feeling part. And then the intellect is the prefrontal cortex. So those are the 3 parts of your brain. Now, remember, everything that you process goes in this order. There's a couple of ways to, stop that order. Tell me more is the best, fastest, easiest way to make your own brain stop. And then you go, okay, if you get in the habit of saying it, then you start to realize, oh, I'm saying that for a reason. Why am I saying that? Well, I'm saying that because I feel uncomfortable or whatever. And then you start thinking about, well, where am I? I'm having an emotional reaction. Okay, well, let's just pull the logic in. I'm gonna sit down with a piece of paper and that person, or whatever the case is, and walk through what the real problem is. The second tip to the tell me more is, once you realize, okay, I've said tell me more because something doesn't feel quite right for me, then you say, what is the business problem? Right? And so especially with the people that you work with, it's really easy because you become very close with each other. So the things, like, I care about what your kids are doing. I care about your ankle. If you broke your ankle, I care about all these things. And so when that person creates an event, or an engagement with that person creates an event in your brain, right? In the love brain and the feeling brain that feels backwards of the I like you, I care about you, and the things that are important, it really sends your brain into a tailspin. So when you're working with, when you're having conflict or managing change with people that you're really close to, it's even harder than the people you're not close to. Because your clients, and you get close to them eventually, sort of, unless they're your favorite client like McLeod, and then you're really close to them. But it's not the same as like your work family. With your clients, you're like, listen, I do care about your kids and I'm gonna listen to your stories. But if you don't decide to get your act together and help me help you, there's not much I can do here. Right? That's different than your colleagues. And so when you think about working with your colleagues, the first thing, if you're working through change and it feels hard, tell me more. And then, okay, Missy, I feel like I'm getting a little bit sideways here and it's not intentional. I can't see the business problem for what it is. Can we get back to like just the basics of what problem are we solving? So really those two things, those two statements, tell me more and what's the business problem, almost always slow down a conversation and make it a little bit less hot. Even if you're working with someone who really, you're just like, listen, I don't know what to do with this guy. Sean's a crazy person. Like I can't ever, he just gets mad every time I talk to him. Even then, if you work with any of those kinds of people, they really can't, their brains can't let them stand outside of that logical approach. Which we'll talk about in a minute with non-complimentary behavior. Questions about the three brains and accountability or comments.
Yeah, I'll volunteer a comment on that. So what's the business problem? Use your judgment, but assume that there is one and help the person try and piece it together. Because there have been some times where I just haven't been able to articulate things. And it's kind of, well, Bruce, you can't explain it and that's on you. So we'll just move on. And then like a week or two later, a thing happens and it's like, this is what I was trying to tell you before. So do ask the business need and be genuinely curious about it. Don't just say, well, you have to explain it to me and convince me. Do have some genuine curiosity.
Yes, that authenticity is hard to fake, I guess. So if you really, what I do, if I can't be, and let me tell you, I'm an eye roller. I think a lot of people in the world are just dummies. And I struggle to keep that to myself. So it is hard for me sometimes to be authentic, especially if we're working with a client that, they're kind of in their own way, or they've got a million excuses about why they can't get you a thing or, whatever. So what I do to help myself, like actually my face, be better managed and I mean, not appear authentic. I authentically care, but boy, it is hard for me to look like I do. So that's why, like when I was saying, hey, Missy, we've got a business problem. What I do is say, I just can't get my head where you're at and I must be missing something. So if you can say, make it a little bit about, listen, this is about me. I'm missing something here. That feigns authenticity, if nothing else. I mean, or at least you can say it and they go, oh, okay, so this is what they'll think is, oh, this is about Meg. She's clearly doesn't. And what happens a lot of times, truly, is you don't actually have all of the information that maybe someone, just like Bruce said, whether they're, if somebody asked me to explain something, I get flustered and I can't explain it well, or I know it, but I can't quite dump it out of my brain and give it to you. Or maybe there's some sort of, with clients and new teams internal to an organization, there's like some bad juju and some context that maybe you haven't shared with people and maybe you don't want to. But if you start to share a little tiny bit of that, they go, oh, I see. So it's, well, how come, I thought Meg was supposed to send me this report. well, she is. I'll talk to her. And then somebody's gonna go, well, why don't you hold her accountable? She's missed the deadline for the last 3 months, and blah, blah. And you say, well, she's got some personal things going on. And then that person goes, oh, sorry. So sometimes it's about context, and sometimes it's just, gosh, I can't quite explain to you what I'm trying to say. So if you can say, I think I'm missing something. Can we take a second? Can you explain from your perspective what you're seeing here? I know what I'm seeing, but we're clearly not on the same page. So again, really draw that logic back in, even if it's an emotional sort of kind of conversation that feels emotional, they really can't. Their brain won't let them argue with you. And if all of that fails, then you leave the room. Remember, we're all just 5-year-olds with checkbooks. Works with kids, works with adults too. I think we're going to take a break and just leave the room for 5 minutes and say, I just need some time to process. Okay, anything else? Questions, comments, thoughts about accountability or this 3 brain stuff? As a reminder, the direction we're going with all these tools is to talk about those 4 values that we decided on last time. So thinking about how we're going to build those out, if any of this draws out some thoughts for you about how this matters within McLeod for trust, unified strategic vision, accountability, and alignment, then jot down some notes, because we're going to be talking about that later. Or you can bring it up and I'll jot down the notes, either way. Okay, so this is more brain stuff. This will save you a lot of time. This is actually kind of the main piece of really the brain tricks in terms of short circuiting. They call it short circuiting your brain. So your brain typically does this number 1, 2, 3. This teaches you how to actually go 1, because you're obviously going to have a reaction to new information, even if it's a small reaction, because you've trained yourself. So you're going to go 1, 3, and then 2, 1, 3, 2. I'm using some basic terms, or I'm simplifying it, but that's about how it goes. So I'm not going to explain this to you because there's a video that explains it better than I do. So I'm going to pull that baby up.
Why are 93% of Sleep Number sleepers very satisfied with their bed?
Does anybody have a sleep number? Because if you don't, you're going to have one soon. Okay, I think you can't share my screen or see my screen though. So I'm going to fix that. Does everyone see the lovely sleep number bed? Okay. And can you hear the gentleman talking you into a sleep number bed? Very good.
Maybe it's because you can adjust your comfort and firmness on either side, your Sleep Number setting, to help.
Imagine a microscopic-sized ladder contained in the part of our brain that will label our subconscious. The ladder of inference, which was first proposed by Harvard professor Chris Argyris, is the basis of this model. Every time we interact with someone, that experience enters the ladder at the bottom. That same experience zips up the ladder in the blink of an eye, exiting at the top. This process happens thousands of times a day without us knowing it. Let's focus on what happens on each rung of the ladder. On the first rung, we have the raw data and observations of our experience. This is very similar to what someone watching a video recording of our experience would see. Moving up to the second rung, we filter in specific information and details from our experience. We unknowingly filter based on our preferences, tendencies, and many other aspects that we believe are important. On to the third rung, we assign meaning to the information we have filtered through. This is where we start to interpret what our information is telling us. On the fourth rung, a very crucial thing happens. We develop assumptions based on the meaning we created on the previous rung, and we start to blur the distinction between what is fact and what is story. On the fifth rung, we develop conclusions based on our assumptions. This is also where our emotional reactions are created. On the sixth rung, we adjust our beliefs about the world around us, including the person or people involved in our experience of the moment. On the seventh and final rung, we take action based on our adjusted beliefs. Still with me? Great. Let's take a real-life example and run it up the ladder to see how this all works. Have you ever been cut off in a parking lot, signal light on, as you steer toward your coveted spot only to slam on your brakes at the last minute as someone pulls in front of you and steals your spot away? Imagine that experience and notice all of the data and observations landing on the first rung of your ladder. Now let's watch what we pay attention to on the second rung. Who cares that it's sunny out and the birds are chirping? The 50% off sign outside of your favorite store is meaningless. You filter in the sensation of your grip tightening on the wheel, you feel your blood pressure rise, you hear the squeal of your brakes, and you notice the expression on the face of the other driver as he pulls in front of you and quickly looks away. Time for our third rung. Ever since you were young, your parents taught you the importance of waiting in line and taking your turn. You live and die by the rule of first come, first serve. And now this guy has just stolen your spot. What gives? Up to the fourth rung we go. Watch closely as our assumptions take over and our story creates itself. That stupid jerk. Didn't his parents teach him anything? How could he not see my signal light? He must never pay attention. Why does he think he's more important than anyone else? Jumping quickly to the fifth rung, we conclude that this guy is heartless, inconsiderate. He needs to be taught a lesson and put in his place. We feel angry, frustrated, vindictive, justified. On our sixth rung, we adjust our beliefs based on the experience. That's the last time I give in. Next time someone tries to cut me off, tires will be smoking on the pavement as I squeal past them into my spot. And finally, our last rung, we take action. We back up, pull up behind his car, honk our horn, and roll down our window to scream a few choice words his way. Now, imagine, he walks over quickly, apologizing. His wife, who is almost due with their first baby, called him from inside the mall to say she is in labor and needs to get to the hospital immediately. We are momentarily shocked, apologize profusely, and wish him luck as he rushes toward the entrance. What just happened here? What changed? Why is this so significant? In our parking lot example, our beliefs were short-circuited by the ladder of the other individual. My wife is in labor. I need to get there quick. There's a parking spot. Phew. Oh, geez, I cut someone off. I better apologize quickly so they don't think I'm a jerk. But what if we were able to short-circuit our ladders ourselves, proactively, by choice? Guess what? We can. Let's return to our unique human function of free will. Next time you notice yourself reacting to your experience, pay focused attention to your ladder. Ask yourself what beliefs are at play. Where did they come from? What data and observations did you filter in as a result of your beliefs? And why? Are your assumptions valid and supported by facts? Would a different set of assumptions create different feelings and result in new and better conclusions and actions? We all have our own unique ladder. Be mindful of yours and help others to see theirs.
Okay. So, really, the trap that we fall into with our brain is this, kind of these three pieces right here, where we kind of we cherry pick the data that we want to, not on purpose. Well, you know you're doing it on purpose when you learn these tricks and then you keep doing it. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to choose to believe that Rick actually likes to be late to make me mad. Well, that's clearly not it. But if I choose that and I'm kind of a fully formed a person with free will and that knows these wild brain tricks, then I can choose that. And that is just bad behavior on me. But these three parts, we select kind of information that serves our agenda, if you will, or kind of our assumptions that we want to make. And then we assign this meaning to them. You know, well, Rick's late and he does it because he doesn't like me and he knows it frustrates me. Right. And then building in those assumptions, which is, man, my mom taught me this is not true about my mother at all, just so you know. My mom taught me to never be late. 15 minutes early is late. You know, and so Rick really, he's just stomping on, you know, the traditional fabric of my family. And I sound like I'm exaggerating, but I'm really not. Like, this is truly what people's brains do. And ours a little bit, but probably not as much. I mean, you're sitting in this room, well, one, because Joel made you, but also because I mean, you're interested, right? If you really didn't care about this stuff, you would not. I've had lots of people that just flat won't show up and they're not held accountable. So then they get to not show up and they get to keep their job, which is fascinating to me. But you're here because you want to learn about this stuff. And that means you probably don't spend a lot of time sort of in that victim loop of the accountability model. And in this section, building meaning around something that maybe isn't really true, but you want to believe it is because it serves your agenda to think that, boy, Rick's really trying out to get me. So the challenge, though, is when you're a change maker or a change in a change leadership position, there's a lot of people, most of the people, and especially if they're freaked out about something that's about to change in their life, that are in these buckets a lot. And so the trick is to recognize it. I always say, when I was in the mining industry, and if you, I mean, the mining industry is kind of like the trucking industry. You move cheese an inch for somebody in the mining industry, and it is an all-out come apart. Like, my hard hat used to hang on this hook. Now you moved it to this hook. Or the hard hats used to hang on this wall. Why'd you move them to that wall? Well, because every time somebody swung the door open, it would hit a hard hat and then they would crack. And that is silly. That's the point of a hard hat, is to be solid. So to protect your melon. No, but it used to be on this wall. Yes, Bill, I know it did. So there's people that live in that space. And what I would explain to managers is that if you argue with that person and you're like, I know I am right about this, you probably are. But if you argue with that person, you are trying to apply logic where they don't have logic. You know, you're trying to apply logic where logic doesn't live. So when people are in this space and they're in these parts of their brain, especially this feeling one, they're not applying a lot of logic. So what you hope they can hear you say, they really don't hear it. All they hear is, listen, I moved your hard hat because I don't care what you think. So keep that in mind when you're working with, you know, other people in the organization and then your clients. When you're moving their cheese and you say, well, listen, this is just how it has to be. And when you say that, what you're meaning is this is how it has to be because it makes better sense for the business, because it saves us money, because it saves you money, because it's better for the individual, you know, like all the waterfall of reasons that you know exist. If you don't say those out loud, they really aren't thinking about it. They can't, their brain is preventing them from knowing that. It's like a wall between, you know, these two parts of your brain and this part of your brain. So when you feel super frustrated because you're like, well, you're clearly just not listening. You're just trying to argue your point. A lot of times that's how I feel. Like, you just want to win. Just want to win this conversation. Well, that's true, because that's always true for everybody. But that's not really their goal. They're trying to understand. So the helpful thing about the ladder of inference, where did it go? Curtis, is to know that there's not a lot of logic going on here. So when you hear people say, things that don't make a lot of sense, that are emotionally fused, you can say, okay, I know where you're at. Or if you're really self-aware, which probably after this you will be, you'll say that to yourself. Oh, Rick, he shows up late because he doesn't like me. Is that really true? No, Rick probably doesn't care about me at all. He's late because he's got something else going on, and so I should check in with him. So you can help yourself in that way, and then you can help other people. So what you really thinking about this part is the tell me more. If you're in a hard situation, you're helping somebody manage change. This part up here, this actions part, is what is the business problem? And that's why I say if you use those two together, that puts sort of the reptilian brain and the prefrontal cortex working together. And so it kind of cuts out that emotional brain until you're ready for those emotions. That's what I would say. So this is what is the business problem? What are the things we really need to get done today? Let's not worry about all this other stuff in here, whether it's my stuff or your stuff or their stuff. Let's not worry about that. What is the business problem that we're trying to solve? Questions on the ladder of inference? Okay, good. We talked last time about non-complementary behavior. And we talked about it sort of in with the brain stuff. I wanted to share this video because I think, well, the video is fine. It's not about the video, but the story behind the video does a really good job of helping you believe that this really works. Honestly, still, when I listen to this video, I'm like, I don't know if I buy this, but they swear this is a true story. And I just want to make a caveat statement because this seems important in these days that we find ourselves, these days of our lives. This is on Invisibility is on NPR. It's a podcast on NPR. It has no political anything in it. It's really just a story about people and a psychological approach to diffusing hard situations. So please don't worry if you don't like NPR. This has nothing to do with politics. This one's kind of long, you'll see, but we're not going to watch the whole thing.
This story starts in Washington, D.C., with 8 friends gathered around a backyard dinner table on a warm summer night. They were celebrating, toasting friendship and family and the new restaurant that one of the women had opened earlier in the week. And everyone was having a good time.
It was kind of one of those great evenings, lots of awesome food and French wine, and it was like a magical night.
Michael Rabdo, the man that you just heard, was there with his wife and his 14-year-old daughter, Kyber. He says it was getting later in the evening, maybe around 10, when it happened.
I was standing beside my wife, and I just saw this arm with a long barrel gun come between us. It was as if in slow motion, this hand, and then it just got really quiet.
The hand belonged to a man, medium height, in a clean, high-end sweatsuit. He raised the gun and held it first to Michael's friend, Christina, and then to the head of Michael's wife.
And then he said, give me your money or I'm going to start effing shooting.
Just kept repeating, give me your money, give me your money.
That's Kyber, Michael's daughter.
You looked anxious, nervous.
Eyes wide.
His tone was very aggressive. I mean, when he said, give me your money or I'm going to start effing shooting, we believed him.
But there was a problem, which is that no one in the party actually had money. It was a fluke thing, but there it was.
What are we going to do? You can't just produce stuff.
So they just started talking, grasping for some way to dissuade the man, and naturally started with guilt.
What would your mother...
What would your mother think of you?
And he said something like, I don't have an effing mother.
The exchange got more and more tense.
It was just fueling the atmosphere of danger.
And Michael remembers thinking, this is headed towards a very bad end.
Someone was going to get hurt, if not all of us. This was it.
But then one of the women at the table, this woman, Christina, pipes up. She has an offer for the man.
Said, you know, we're here celebrating. Why don't you have a glass of wine and sit down?
And it was like a switch. He could feel the difference. It was definitely the right thing to say.
All of a sudden, Michael says, the look on the man's face changed.
And he tasted the wine and just said, damn, that's a really good glass of wine. And we're like, well, I'll have some more. And we poured him some more wine, and we had some cheese there too. And so he reached down for the cheese, and then he put the gun in his pocket, and he sat down.
The man drank his wine, ate his cheese, and then he said something that no one expected. Said it almost to himself.
I think I've come to the wrong place. And we were all like, hey, I understand. These things happen.
For a moment, they all sat there together. The stars overhead twinkling, the sound of chirping insects in the night air.
And then he said something just so strange. He just said, can I get a hug? And my wife hugged him, and our friend hugged him. And then he said, can we have a group hug?
And so everyone got up and formed a circle around the man.
I can't tell you how strange that was, but we all did come around him and hug him, and he said he was sorry, and he walked out with a glass of wine out the gate.
All they could think to do was run into the house and hug and cry, half in fear, half in gratitude and relief.
It was like, this was like a miracle. It was like a miracle.
But was it a miracle? Or is there a better word for what happened that night? Before we start, do you have any questions for me?
No questions.
This is a professor at Michigan State University named Chris Hopwood. Chris spends his life looking at how people...
We're not going to listen to Dr. Chris. Again, this is on YouTube. Well, if you want to listen to the whole thing, the episode, you can pick it up on the Invisibilia podcast. But this little chunk snippet is on YouTube, and it will be in this presentation that you're going to be getting. So you can listen to it then if you want to listen to the rest of it. So honestly, like, I have a little bit of a hard time believing the sort of magnitude of that story, in the sense that my grandmother was a cranky woman, just the dirty, crankiest woman you'd ever meet. She's a very strong Irish Catholic woman from upstate New York, smoked like a chimney. I spent a significant amount of time sitting on the step, and if you got assigned to the step there was 2 steps into the kitchen. If you were assigned to a step in the kitchen, then you were in deep trouble. So I was probably a little more bold than she cared for. And she had already raised 7 kids. I was the oldest granddaughter, or oldest grandchild. So by the time I came around, I think she was like, oh my God, just go away. And I remember I mean, I liked her. I thought she was cool, but I'm telling you, there was nothing about her that I remembered being nice. But her one very, very famous saying, and I remember she died when I was pretty young. I was like 9 or 10, but I still remember her saying all the time, if you can't be nice on purpose, kill them with kindness. And that's really what the idea is behind non-complimentary behavior, is killing people with kindness. So when somebody is having a total meltdown, like somebody could be trying to rob you at gunpoint, offer them a glass of wine. That's maybe not a good idea. I mean, in that specific situation that worked out, but really sort of offering a hand to someone who maybe finds themselves in a bad position. And I mean, I'm going to say, I know we're getting a little bit in the weeds about how this stuff works. And I don't actually share all of this with a lot of our clients because they don't understand it, or they wouldn't process it. I've known you guys, I mean, it's not like we're best friends, but I've known you long enough, and I've known about McLeod long enough to know that you're really intentionally here to learn, how do we sort of unlock the treasure chest of good change management and change leadership. So in truth, it's about feelings, and how do you help people manage them and really avoid them until they should be applied. And that's the nuts and bolts of it. Is our brain kind of hamstrings us by investing emotional thoughts and feelings into something, into a change or a situation, before we're really ready to process that part, before we've applied logic. And so the trick for us as change leaders is to help those people maintain some level of logic so that they can process those emotions when the time is right. So I don't know if you're finding all of this to be sort of annoying, or gosh, we've gotten a little off track. I hope you don't feel that way. And if you do, I am sorry, but I'm here to tell you, these are the tricks that really help unstick change for people, and in a hurry. And these are the things that people don't know about. I mean, you can go get a change management certification from ProSci and learn ADCAR and do all that stuff, and it's valuable. It really is. But if people are not engaging with you about change, if they're not feeling good about it, none of that stuff matters on paper. So this is really it. It's the brain tricks, and that's how you get people around the horn faster. Questions about this kind of all the brain stuff? I think this is, before I lie to you, let me
Yeah, Meg, I would say I'm fortunate enough that I get to deal in a lot of time over the last couple of years, a lot of upset customers. And, I think the feeling side of it, because at the end of the day, it is a business, and it's a business relationship. Not that I don't care about their kids, but I do. But ultimately, I find that the best means of quelling the anger is the authentically focus on, I care, and I want to partner, and I want to help. I want to listen. Because, I mean, that's gone so far. I mean, it's made such a big impact, just opening up dialogue where we can then start rebuilding and fixing, what, I know Sean's been been on some of those calls too. And, I think it's a great way. And the other thing that my mom taught me when I was really little, and I think really, it always hits home. I actually said this last week in the office, and you get a really, really difficult customer that no matter what you do, they always seem to be angry. Is that, sometimes the people that are the hardest to love are the ones that need the most love. Meaning that we've got to work harder to fix and to get them to a point where you can have a conversation because you care. And I know it's, more emotion than sometimes we want to be cautious how far we jump into, but it does help.
Mm-hmm. Yes, It does.
You know, Meg, one of the points that you made there just reinforces the old idiom, you know, about slow down to speed up. You know, most of the time we don't make progress in change management because of those assumptions and all that we make about where someone else is instead of paying attention to where they are. And yes, it's a gross thing to say. Yeah, we're here to manipulate people to their best. People don't like that word manipulate. But in truth, what we're manipulating and have to manipulate is ourself. We have to manipulate ourselves and hold ourselves accountable as leaders to achieve the results of managing other people. And that doesn't mean that the other person's sitting on truth, like you said, you know, half an hour ago. You know, you may be exactly right, but the way you present it may change that result of the truth or the rightness of what you are. And so there is accountability in there, but accountability is on both sides of the balance. It isn't just strictly on one side or the other. And as leaders, we have a greater responsibility for considering where that other person is, because as you've been talking about, if that person is not in a place to receive input and process it logically, then you're wasting your time ultimately. And slowing down to identify, and this has been a real problem for me throughout, you know, for longer than anybody else on this call, because I'm older than anybody else on this call. But it's been a real learning experience for me in the last few years to actually understand that, and trying to put it into practice has been a big challenge, because it's changing. It's changed behavior internally. So it's not just habits, it's thought processes, it's subconscious, you know, all those assumptions and everything, and be able to trying to step back to say, okay, wait a minute, let me listen. You know, in communication, you threw up a slide a minute ago real briefly about, you know, the communication loop. And the whole key there is we have to listen to understand. And whether that's understanding the basic premise or understanding from feedback from the person that they've actually received what I've given them. You know, we have actually communicated because I sent a message, they got it, and they fed it back to me. So we've got a closed loop. If we don't stop or slow down to the point of identifying that, we're just going to waste a lot more time. And we've seen that. We have all experienced it. Everyone on here is an experienced person, and we know it intellectually. But we're on that ladder. You know, we're zipping up and down it. You know, that escalator isn't broken and stopped. It's running really fast and throwing us off at the top. So I find this personally very captivating and really refreshing. You know, for the place where I am. In this change management journey, and considering change management with respect to the objective that we're trying to achieve as leaders and managers.
Beautiful. Well, that makes me happy. I share this stuff, and I've had some people be like, so what does this have to do with business? I'm like, nothing for you. That's what. We'll move on. Okay, so the next couple tools are really, so that was kind of the heady, abstract sort of, how do we get people there? The next few tools are really more, probably tactical in nature, maybe a little bit more business and communications focused. So we're switching gears a little bit. I think maybe to get our heads right about that, do you guys want to just take a quick 5-minute break? We've been on for a little over an hour. Everybody can have a break. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right, you can see my screen, yes. well. So this part is really basic, this communication piece, but we have also talked about tying, in the later slides, we'll talk about tying helix culture types to the communication, kind of the basic communication loop, feedback loop. So I guess the point of this slide is to say it seems simple, and we've just talked through why it's not simple and how it's not simple and a few things you can do to make it easier. But if you get really good at cutting all of that extra out of there, the communication loop really is simple. And just showing this helps us kind of remember that sometimes it's overcomplicated with all this noise, and we have to account for that, but that doesn't have to be what drives our engagement with someone. And really it's just about, I'm going to send a message, I'm going to receive a message, I'm listening to understand, as Joel pointed out, I'm listening to understand what you're saying, the essence of your comment, not just the words. And then also watching for those nonverbal cues, as well as listening to what they have to say. So seems simple, doesn't always feel simple. And we're kind of learning today, well, you've been learning for several months, how to make that work better. So, and we've made a lot of these points, so I don't need to belabor the point. You guys are very clear on these concepts. What you think you said is not necessarily what that other person heard. And the same is true the other way, obviously. What they think they said is not what you heard. And so really watching those facial cues helps you understand if they're with you or not with you. Now, when you're working with people that, like your colleagues that you work with pretty consistently, you don't even probably need the facial cues. You kind of know what people like or don't like. You know how to say something to Bruce different than how you might say it to Wes, because they hear things differently. So internal to your organization, this becomes a little, well, if you work at like within this team, I suppose this is true. This becomes a little less hard or less important because it becomes very natural to have good conversation. Outside of this group, perhaps, but internal to McLeod, this might be really important to be thinking about. Because maybe you guys do have a harder time working outside of this group, because you've been working really hard on communicating well with each other. I know in the last several months or a year, or whatever it's been, together. So that might still be a challenge, and kind of sounds like maybe the next step is to push that good communication out into McLeod Global. And then working with your clients, absolutely, this is true, that whatever you think you said, they probably didn't hear. And wherever you think there's logic or common sense, or obviously this is the next step in software implementation or software development, they don't know what you're talking about. A shared client of ours, I promise you, even their business analysts, even their software dev team, even their IT group, even their, business experts, their subject matter experts on the business side don't exactly know how their work works sometimes. So where anything makes sense to you, if they're giving you the eyes, probably they don't get it. Did we do, I swear we talked through these words, but this was not, I made myself notes in my presentation and said, we didn't cover these. And this was in the, we didn't cover these bucket. So have you seen this slide? Okay, crazy. I don't know who I'm mistaking you for. This is a few tips and tricks, some practical application about words and how we use them. So if you use so at the beginning of a sentence, depending on the context, I use so a lot at the beginning of the sentence. If you use it and put that snark on it, sort of that negative attitude. So you're telling me you're not going to get this done by the deadline. I mean, obviously that statement isn't just about the so, but the so tricks your brain, sort of your limbic system part of your brain, that emotional part, into being okay with being snarky. So you want to make sure that you don't, if you're feeling like a little bit like, oh, eye rolly, come on, Rick, we've talked about this 100 times kind of feelings. Try not to start your sentences with so, because your tone will not, your brain won't let your tone get away with being positive. It'll sound very genuinely snarky. But this is an interesting one. So anyone who, see, I start a lot of sentences with so, like a lot of them. There are several people who use but instead of and it's mostly just a habit. So I hear, yeah, Missy, that's a great point. But if we did this, and what you really mean is and, not but. That's a great point. And let's add this to it. So I'm sure some of you have heard the phrase yes and. So don't use but, use yes and. So wherever you can, use yes and instead of but. But is a arguing word, so that automatically kicks that reptilian brain into thinking that we're going to have to fight about this. So anybody that you're talking to that doesn't know all the cool brain tricks, here's you say but, and they're like gearing up for a fight. I'm here for it. Let's try it out. I'm going to be right. And that's not really your intention at all. So when you say, and you think you're brainstorming, oh, that's a great point, but we should also think about blah, blah thing. And you think you're brainstorming, but their brain here's back here, here's but, and they're like, oh yeah, you don't think I have a good idea? Well, let me tell you what. So thinking about how you use but, it's not, I mean, sometimes you have to use but, because you're like, no, really, I don't think that's right. I think you're wrong. Even in those cases though, trying to use a different word than but, there's something about the but word that really sends people over the edge when they're in a state of conflict or feeling a little anxious. So try not to use it.
Yeah, one of the things that really helped me on but is a negation. So if you're trying to negate everything you just said, use the word but. So when you're trying to build people up and say, hey, this is a really good idea, and we still have this challenge that doesn't seem to be addressed with that. That's a lot more positive than that's a good idea, but you didn't handle this. So but means it's not a good idea. The way that also helps drive it home is imagine telling your spouse or loved ones, I really love you, but. Okay, well, do you really love them if that's the word you use? That was just a very impactful way for me to help remember that.
That's pretty good. I've not heard that. I mean, I have said that to my husband. So I love you, but just kidding. Oh gosh, you made me think of something else that I wanted to share about but before we went on. It'll come back to me. Like I am sharing my screen, right? Oh yeah, okay. Like I put this one on here because the younger folks use like too much, and it's like annoying, and it like devalues their credibility. So I like make sure I put it on here so they don't like use it as much. Not everybody does. I use it quite a bit because I do a lot of comparison talking, and I'm I use a lot of analogy to drive home points with people. So I do use the word like probably more than I would like to in an annoying way. But I just add it on here because it's these small things like using the word like too much that make an impact within generations and an inability to sort of value each other. Just and sorry, these two words really devalue your credibility, and also make you unforgettable. So if you send somebody a request, hey Missy, I need to meet with you for just a second, or just a minute. Sorry to bother you with this. I know you're really busy. That says, what I need to talk to you about isn't that important. And really, this is what's kind of like what you're saying is not what's being received. What you're trying to say is, man, I'm sorry to be annoying. I just need a couple minutes of your time, but this is really important. What Missy might be hearing in that email is, hey, listen, this isn't that important, but I do need to kind of figure it out. So can I like sneak a few minutes of your time when you have a minute in between the 8 hours of meetings you have today and the 10 hours of work you have to do? Right? That's what you're hearing. So cut out the justs and the sorries. A couple things happen. It really cleans up the communication you have with people. It also generates more credibility and timeliness in just everything that everybody does within a team. Also with the client, when you send messages to clients and it says, well, I just need your time, or I'm sorry to bother you, it actually trains their brain to start thinking, well, this isn't really that important. So, you know, for those of you who are in sales and implementation, so everybody, when you're really thinking about, you know, like, I know, especially in technology implementation, there's a lot of emphasis around turnaround dates. Like, when do they start implementing? When do they invite people to use the system? How much are people using the system? All that kind of stuff. If you start to use just sorry, hate to bug yous in your emails and your communication with them, that's actually when that lack of interest or lack of use happens, because their brain goes, I guess this isn't that important, even though they know intellectually they're like, this is very important. But then anytime a little hot thing pops up and it rolls through the brain, it hits that limbic system, and then it pulls in all, just kind of like that ladder of inference, it pulls in all that just and sorry and hate to bug you, and it goes, I guess maybe this isn't that important right now. It deprioritizes that whatever software implementation, and then all the fires that are happening are what pop into the logic brain to be managed. So those are big ones that people use a lot. Here's my trick. If I'm going to go have a conversation with someone, and if I feel anxious about it, I either write down or I'll type it into an email, because, you know, when you're something about being in email mode, and boy, if I was going to hit send, I want this to sound really good. So I will type it up in an email or put my bullet points in an email. And if I start out with just or sorries or hate to bug you or any sort of excuse kind of language, I edit it. And then if I'm really nervous, I'll even print that out and take it with me. So that helps. Of course, if you're drafting a real email to be sent out, then you just do it in the email. If you really can't help yourself because you are so frustrated with somebody, your wit's end, draft the email and send it to someone else that you trust. So if I'm Sean, I'm like so sick of this client. Thorny and I have just gotten off a ridiculous call with them for the 75th time. They just whine all the time about everything, but we got to fix this one problem for them because we said we would, blah, blah, blah. I got to send them an email to say, here's how we're going to resolve the issue. I've got all kinds of cranky words in there, or maybe tone, or because in truth, especially with clients, like a lot of times with software implementation, it is your fault that things are screwed up because you're not actually doing your part, man. And that's true. So if I'm Sean, I'm going to send it to Thorny and say, can you edit out my snarkiness, or can you just give this a look and make sure I'm not being too, you know, snotty in this email? So that's another thing that I've done. I'm sure some of you have used that same trick. That's very helpful.
I'm actually never snarky.
I just want to tell you, I have a 13 and 14-year-old daughter. If there were a competition for eye rolling, I would put those two in it and they would win. And it'd be like the Gerber baby competition. So they'd win like some scholarship for college. Maybe I should start this. I think a lot of people would enroll their kids in it. Do age divisions and everything. They get it from me, so I really, it's, I mean, choices, right? But it's my fault that they're like this, because they're like me. Okay, so shoulder shrugs and eye rolls. I mean, again, it's snickering, ignoring people, arguing, talking under your breath. We're all adults in some of this. I'm going to tell you, with some clients I've worked with, this is actually very, very applicable, even though I can say we're all fully formed adults. I think that's not true with this group of people at the level you're at in your careers and you're in your careers. But if you see it happening with other people, you can kind of take that into account when you're working through this whole thing. So
But
you can be decoding. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, but Meg, it'd be really hard to be a consultant if you can't start sentences with so. So is one of your words there, but you have to start sentences with so to be a good consultant, right?
You must, because I start a lot of my sentences with so.
Most good consultants do, yeah.
Yeah, even my text messages, like I'm coaching, we put together a travel volleyball team. Every flipping message I'm going to send out to all the moms says so, and I'm like, why do you feel the need? Like, I feel like I'm just, carrying everybody with me all the time. So here's what we're going to do next. That's ridiculous.
Meg, I have a question on those that are kind of snarky and say stuff under their breath. Like on the one-on-ones, that's good signals. Is there a way to, I guess, address that or call that out in like group settings where, you've got a 5 or 10 person group, and I'm sure the answer varies on whether or not you called the meeting or not. Do you have any tips or things on how to address and or deal with that in those settings?
Yep. So the first thing I would say for you, especially Bruce, as a stabilizer, is my tips are going to make you uncomfortable. But I think, yeah, that but was on purpose. But I think that you are advanced enough in understanding all this, you'll still feel comfortable doing it. So if you're in charge of the meeting, of course you can say, hey, Thorny, I think I know what your concern is, and I want to talk about that because that's really important. So really, if you're going to call somebody out in a group setting, and sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's inappropriate to do it. Sometimes people take advantage of being in charge of the room, and then do you have something to share with the class? Drives me bonkers. But I think if you know the group of people and sort of what that anxiety piece is, draw attention to that from a business perspective and say, hey, Thorny, I know I can see you're a little uncomfortable about, and I bet it's about X thing. And if I were you, I'd feel the same way. This is why we're here. Let's take some time to talk about it. So providing everybody else in the room context about why you want to talk about it. And it's still going to make the Thorny in that example, it's still going to make that person comfortable. But at least if you can provide the context and the support to say, listen, this is why we're here. We need to talk about it. If it's a problem, it's a problem. Then they don't feel like you've thrown them under the bus as much. If you're not in charge of the room, I think the best way to handle it is pretty similar to if you are in charge of the room, which is there's no fun way to call out somebody being kind of, a curmudgeon in the room. Well, that'd be nice if it actually worked. Well, that'd be nice if we could meet a deadline or whatever they're saying under their breath. So what I'd say is, if you can hear them, pick out the business problem in their statement. So be nice if we could meet a deadline. Let's just, as an example, say, and you don't even have to, if you hear them say it, you don't have to call them out, because what good does that do? So if it's, let's say Mark goes, would be nice if we could meet a deadline. And you say, I have a question. It seems like, or I want to bring up a concern. It really seems like we are having a hard time meeting our deadlines in this specific part of our change process. can we talk about that a minute? And so it doesn't have to be about you at all, or a problem that you even have. But if you hear somebody saying it, it is a problem, whether you believe it or not. So let's just address it. So you don't have to call that person out at all. You can just listen for that problem. If you can't hear the problem, what I would suggest is do take it to a one-on-one. So at a break, maybe, or I mean, if you're in a 1 hour meeting, there's no breaks. But when you have a minute, even if it's after the meeting, say, hey, you know, I kind of saw you talking to so-and-so, or I saw you just say, I saw you mumbling to yourself. I bet it's about XYZ. I'm with you. Let's go talk to whoever had the meeting and make it a smaller group scenario, because that'll make that person feel better. And then whoever was in charge of the meeting or is in charge of the project, whatever, can then take that out to the larger group in the next meeting. So that's not as timely as for an approach, but sometimes that's the most appropriate way to do it.
Is that Meg, that's fitting all, I guess it could be fitting to someone who's, and we know kind of in our own teams, maybe people who are a little bit more passive resistant or passive aggressive, and they will make, is that the same technique to kind of defuse or disarm those people?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. For it, I mean, passive aggressive people are the ones that are going to talk under their breath and go, oh yeah, that'd be nice, you know, roll their eyes, shrug their shoulders. Hey Meg, have you got the blah blah thing done, or did you call Sean and talk to him about the thing? Like that all of those things indicate passive aggressive behavior. And so yes, that would be the exact approach I would use with those people. If you have somebody on your team who really is just passive aggressive, kind of feels like a stick in the mud, kind of dragging us down, the best thing you can do for that person, and for those of you who are order tolerant, self-driven, like me, this is not the funnest. This is like not your idea of a carnival. But the best thing you can do with those people is go talk to them one-on-one and say, man, I can see how uncomfortable you are. Like, we all got to be in this together. There's parts of this that are hard. How can I help you? Like, let's do this together. Like, I'll be your partner in crime. And it doesn't matter if your work itself is actually tangentially related or not related, you know, at all. But if you can help that person, if you can be the eyeballs they see across the room when they're in an uncomfortable meeting, and say, hey man, shrugging your shoulders doesn't help, or, you know, if it's hard for you to talk to Joel, you know, let me help you. Or if you've got something you want to bring up, but you just don't feel comfortable, let me know before the meeting, I'll bring it up. If you can help people in that way, it helps everyone. I will say though, you don't want to become sort of a crutch or an enabler for that person. So I'm not suggesting, you know, if Claudette is just always like, hey, Mark, can you tell Joel that I want a blah, blah thing? You're like, no, that is something you can handle on your own.
I didn't even know
become
that was an option.
It is now. It is now. So you don't want to become an enabler for people's bad behavior, but certainly if you can help somebody feel more comfortable or show them a better way, really, is probably the thing you're doing. Any other questions about those things? Any other, I always like to ask with this slide, any other really annoying tics or traits or characteristics that people have, or words people say that drive you bonkers that you've heard that you'd like to share with the group? I mean, this is not a roasting session. I'm just curious if these are kind of my triggers. There's a lot out there. These are mine and some generic ones. Just curious if there's any others.
Does at the same time fall into this category?
At the same time.
But yeah, this and that, but at the same time, the other and the other, and because I think I use that at times, but it may not be appropriate.
So kind of, yeah, so replacing but maybe.
It's kind of like, I think it's kind of replacing but, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that can drive some people crazy.
I think for me, one of the but word is probably one of my it's definitely one of my big triggers. I think what I've started doing was when I really sense that they're completely negating everything I said, and then they say, yes, but I stop and say, okay, so up to the but part, what do you disagree with what I'm saying before you tell me what is the next part? And I actually found it to be, for the most part, pretty effective, unless they're really adamant that they don't want to listen to what my point of view is, and they're just trying to drive theirs.
That's good. That's a good tip. What did you disagree with before the but, before we go on? Is that right? Do I have it right?
Yep.
I like that. You guys are teaching me all kinds of stuff. Another one that I've heard a lot lately that just, I mean, because I'm a communications kind of nerd, especially like like nonverbal communication. So what are you really saying? It really drives me nuts that people are overusing the statement, to be honest. To be honest, I was on a call with a woman the other day. Every sentence, to be honest. I'm like, were you lying before? Like, why are you saying that now, to be honest? So people are using it really to say, well, what I think is, or whatever they're replacing. It's like, stop saying that so much. Only say, to be honest, when you think you're gonna, drop a bomb on somebody. To be honest, you really don't look good in that shirt. To be honest, your hair looks like trash. That is appropriate. To be honest, you kind of stink at your job. Okay. To be honest, I agree with you. What? Why are you saying that? Anyway, that's my new favorite one that drives me bonkers. So don't overuse that or inappropriately use it because it's annoying. Okay. I think that's mostly it. Oh, the okay one that is in here. I put this in here special for one individual a long time ago, so as not to make him uncomfortable. He was the leader of this group, and so I didn't want to. I did talk to him about it one-on-one, and I wanted to bring it up to the group so they understood that it's not necessarily acceptable behavior. And that hoping that they would hold him accountable. Of course, I don't think he even works there anymore, probably for a reason. This guy was retired. I don't know what branch of the service, but he was in the military. He was a veteran, and he made some rank before he got out. So he would end, he was like a drill sergeant. He would end every sentence with, okay. And he would do it like that. Okay. And not always with the crummy face, but the tone was always there. So what I want you to do is go out and restack that wood pile. Okay. Why do you say that? And he was very unaware. He's like, I guess I didn't realize I said it all the time. Yeah, you do. Okay, stop. So I leave this one in here because there's usually an okayer in every bunch. That guy was really an extreme okayer. But if you do end your sentences with okay for confirmation, sometimes it can be perceived as sort of head patting, like, I have to take care of you because you're not very smart. Okay, go do your job. Okay. So if you find yourself in that boat, even if you don't mean that, you're just saying, okay, do you understand? Do you hear me? Maybe say, would you repeat that back to me? I want to make sure I was clear about what I said, and replace okay with that. Okay. So next we're going to, every time I present that slide and we have this conversation, I'm acutely aware for the rest of the presentation that I use all of those words a lot, and I feel silly. So here we are. I know Rachel already covered the experience cube with you, but it was a while ago, and I want to tie it back into kind of what we're talking about now. So when you're thinking about that experience cube and really evaluating, so you've got your observations, what do I actually see is happening in this setting? What do I assume? So that's that ladder of inference piece. What unfair or maybe biased assumptions am I making about the situation or the people in it that aren't really serving me or the business need? What feelings am I associating with it? So that limbic system part, what maybe I don't, maybe, and in truth, there are some people you're just not going to like, and that's okay. So maybe it's that, Heidi's working with me and she really doesn't like me. And that is fine. That is a feeling she gets to own all day long. Meg drives me nuts and I feel frustrated about that. Totally cool. It's important to say that out loud, probably to yourself most of the time. And then what are you going to do with that? Right? So thinking about those observations, those assumptions, and those feelings, and always assigning the most value to the goal. What is the goal? And be better is not a goal. Boy, I wish we could communicate better. Boy, I wish we could meet our timelines better. Boy, I wish. Better is not a future state. Better is just a hope. And so what is better? That's what we're focused on. What is better? So thinking about then all of that stuff, and if you know who you're talking to, if you know their culture type, or if you don't know their culture type, but you could kind of guess it, you guys might start feeling like you're becoming a little bit more expert at guessing what somebody might be. So stabilizers, they need people. They need to feel like, not that everybody is on the same page, but boy, there's got to be a few people in their corner, or they become really passive aggressive, like Mark pointed out. Independents need freedom, so they need to feel like they're not tethered to some, gosh, but this is a hand-holding exercise and everybody needs everybody all the time. So having some sort of freedom about what this project looks like. And then organizers need logic. It just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. So if you start muddying the waters with, well, then Julie said this and she called Nancy and that happened and this happened, the organizer is going to say, excuse me, what is the goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? Because that's what I'd like to talk about. I don't care about Julie or Nancy or their feelings. Now, that's important, but sometimes the organizer's right. We have to come back to that goal piece. And fixers need a mission. So if a fixer gets too bored, so if there's a lot of, oh, Julie and Nancy and this and that, or gosh, we're sort of stuck in analysis paralysis on whatever thing, or we're just waiting for more information, fixers get bored. And this is what they'll do. Do we have any fixers on this team? I don't think there are. Well, then this will really drive you nuts when you run across a fixer. A fixer will create a new problem to solve. So if you ever thought, a lot of fixers are, especially in companies, startups, small companies, there's a lot of fixers in leadership roles. So decision makers that you probably have worked with a lot on the client side. Maybe their people sort of stop responding and like they bought it. We got McLeod. Okay, we're going to implement it. Their people stop responding positively or maybe at all to the implementation process. And they're over here like, yay, we have McLeod. This is going to make life better. They're not communicating with their people at all. And then pretty soon they're like, hey, can the system do this? Could you guys actually customize this one piece? Because that'd be great. We have this really special blah, blah thing in intermodal and yada, yada. And you're just like, dude, people are not responding to my emails. Your people are not responding to my emails about how we're going to implement the basics. Like, let's stay focused, but that's what's happening for that fixer. They need a mission. They need a problem to solve and something exciting. So they create it if it's not already there. Translating to them that, listen, we have an issue over here, a burning fire that we need to put out before we can talk about that. That can be a challenge. Questions, thoughts about Experience Cube? Did Rachel send you the worksheet, if you will, that goes along with the Experience Cube? You have that? Okay, good. If you don't have it or don't, I'll just make a note to include it again so that you have it. It's really helpful if you're in a hurry. So kind of to Joel's point of slow down to speed up, that worksheet asks you some pointed questions that are tied into the Experience Cube. And so it does make you slow down, because if you're gonna take time to find it from Meg in the 9 million emails you have, or you're gonna save it on your desktop, because that's the smart place to put it. But taking time to pull it open and look at those questions seems like, oh my gosh, how old am I? 5? Like, I should be able to sort this out. But if your brain's in a hurry and your emotions are in a hurry about sort of a sticky situation, slowing down for 3 seconds, 30 seconds, probably, and looking at those questions like, oh yeah, okay, this is what I have to be thinking about logically, will help diffuse that conversation you're going to go have even before you have it. It's like magic. Okay. Apparently I have the same thing on 2 slides. So receiver-oriented communication, really that's the best way to communicate. And we add to this is like communications 101 in college. What we add to that is the culture types aspect of it. So when you're thinking about who's receiving your message, not only is it what do they want to hear, but how can they hear it? When can they hear it? Where are they at in that Kurt's change transition model? What is their culture type? Fuzzy's flying in front of my face. What will they be ready to hear? How can you set them up for success? And so how much empathy do I need to use? Sometimes it's a lot. Like the empathy spectrum goes from, I'm going to give you a hug, if that's not too weird for you, to listen, you're just not doing your job. And I care because you're an important part of this team. So, I mean, empathy can be anywhere in there, and you have to kind of figure out where that person's at and what amount of empathy really works for them. And appealing to what message will resonate with them. My husband owns his own business. He has a lawn fertilization business. There's a older gentleman who has a similar, he has a similar business, but it's much bigger, and he provides services we don't provide. He's ready to go. He's ready to retire, not go out of business. He's ready to retire. He wants to sell his business. So we met with him about buying it from him. And he's lovely. He's like this really kind of crotchety, cagey old guy. And he, a lot of by gods and don't you think that kind of attitude. He's adorable. He thinks he's really prickly, but he's adorable. And so we're talking with him, and he's, well, I don't know. I want the right person to buy this business because, man, I've worked this business for 35 years and I've got all these contracts and whatever. And yep, I totally get that. So I'm listening to what he's saying, and I said, Merle, Quillen and I we live where we grew up. I said, we grew up in this town. We have a family. We want to be a big part of this community. This gives us an opportunity to do that. We want to see this business succeed because you have worked so hard to grow it. And I really appealed to that gooey center, inside of that prickly cactus. And so I all but used a hug on that guy. And the next thing you know, he was like, okay, I think this is going to be a good deal. So really you can get into the juicy parts of the prickliest cactuses. You just have to understand what's going to work for them. So really paying attention to those culture types and where they're at in their state of change, listening to understand what that is versus just listening for the sort of logic pieces, and then apply empathy at the right amounts, sprinkle it in at the right amounts. This is kind of like when your grandma, she makes cinnamon, my grandma makes these amazing cinnamon rolls. And I asked her one time for the recipe and she goes, well, I don't have a recipe. I'm like, how do you know how to make them? Well, I just do it. I said, well, what do you use? And she rattles this all off, almost like she wanted to keep it a secret. Cause I'm like, I can't even write that down that fast. And so I said, well, could I just come make them with you? And I did. I still don't have it down to a fine science. But I had to be with her and make them with her. It's about this much brown sugar and it's about this much butter, and depends on what the weather's like. She always says, well, kind of depends on what the pressure system's doing. And I'm like, what? Now I have to be a weatherman and make good cinnamon rolls? But you do have to kind of understand those specific pieces, and then you start to develop your own way to make really, really good cinnamon rolls for communication in this case. So a few other tips based on culture types. So stabilizers probably going to prefer face-to-face. And if they're kind of back to that, how do you call out somebody who's passive aggressive in a meeting conversation? Sometimes the best way to do it is to just pull that person aside later and say, hey man, you just seem really uncomfortable. And a stabilizer is probably gonna go, no, it's not that, it's this. And you just listen through what they have to tell you, and they'll eventually get it out there. And then you can sort of make some suggestions about how you can help them through that. So they're going to want to connect with the group, but if they're really uncomfortable, if they're already uncomfortable, one-on-one is the best way to kind of one-on-one, face-to-face, sort of more familiar setting. Organizers, totally fine with an email most of the time. Data-driven communication, like don't send me some diatribe about the Julie Nancy thing. I just want to know what the facts are. How can we fix this problem? Now, I will say, a self-driven person, organizer or independent, if they see that the problem is a people thing, they're going to then attack that. And they'll just call it right out like it is. Well, clearly Julie and Nancy are not on the same page about what the problem is. And everybody goes, oh geez, they said it out loud. Just roll with it and say, you know, I've noticed that there's some issues with that specific part of the, you know, the business or the project we're working on. So if you do ever have anybody who calls out, you know, the elephant in the room, just draw it right back to that business issue. Say, well, you know, I think that the conflict there really isn't about Julie and Nancy. It's about this problem, and let's fix that problem. And then fixers, they want to be part of the discussion. Rachel's constantly, let's talk about it. Let's brainstorm together. Drives me bonkers. But sometimes that's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to get everybody in the room and talk about it. They will sort of rabbit hole on things that are not an essential part of the conversation. So it's important sometimes to draw a fixer back in. So just the example of the sort of chaos tolerant fixer client who's like, can we add this module? And you're like, I'm getting no responses from emails. It's a desert over here. Like, we got to fix that problem first. So that can be challenging sometimes to draw people back in. A lot of times if people rabbit hole on a specific thing, it's because they're uncomfortable talking about the other stuff anyways. So they don't want to have that hard conversation. So you do have to kind of pull them back into that to solve that problem. Independents, probably fine with periodic check-ins. They like time to process ideas. So yesterday, Rachel and I were kind of talking through some stuff about Rose Group and building out our team and the different lines of businesses that we have and some financial stuff. And she's just rattling all this stuff off, making notes and doing calculations on her phone. And I'm like, I'm not listening to you, because what you're saying doesn't even make sense to me, because I'm thinking about other things. So what I typically do in that situation as an independent is say, I just need some time to think about this. Can we set up time tomorrow to talk about it? And I promise I will go away and think about it and make my own notes or whatever. So if you see an independent being real quiet or stoic, or they almost look frustrated, it's probably because they're trying to think through what you're saying if you're rattling things off pretty fast. So maybe just recognize that and say, you know, let's just count this as sort of our brainstorming session. We can get back together tomorrow, and they'll go, oh, okay. And then they'll start actually probably engaging with you a little bit more. Also, they relish healthy debates and an alternative perspective. So where a lot of people feel like that creates conflict and is really gross, the Joels and the Megs of the world are like, oh no, let's talk about that. Because I'm interested to know what you think. And I'm here to tell you, I take no offense to anyone's statements ever, which stabilizers especially are like, yeah, I don't know if I believe you. I swear. And I promise you, Joel doesn't either. And it's kind of almost annoying for other people to deal with us. Cause it's like, well, why do you even want to debate this? Why are we talking about it? Why are you so passionate about this? Because I want to fix the problem. And I have no emotional, if there's a problem for me to fix or something to think about or talk about, I have no emotional register. I truly don't. I am all about the problem, which I'm not suggesting that that's healthy in any way, but it's what you get when you're dealing with an independent. So if you're having a conversation with Joel as an example, and he's like, well, what's the problem? And you're like, well, it's about these people and whatever. And he's like, well, that's not the problem. The problem is this business thing. Make sure you say, I hear you. And yes, however, there is this piece that's stuck, and make him pause for that and say, this really is a problem. I need you to trust me on this. I'm, intimately involved with this, with these people at this point. So, thinking through how to interact with those independents, especially if they want a healthy debate. Okay, questions or thoughts on that experience cube piece, and then how does that show up for different culture types, and how can we leverage the communication cycle, knowing what we now know about culture types and the Kurtz change transition model? Good. Thorny, are you doing okay? You got your ankle up? Can you not hear me? Hello, McFly. No, maybe not. Well, I hope you're good. Okay, so the real challenge of all of this at the end of the day is to manage our time well. Have you all seen the Eisenhower, or have any of you seen the Eisenhower matrix? I'm sure at least some of you have. Yeah. This is just another piece of not rocket science, but gosh, we get really bad at managing this well when we're super busy, or if we're in a state of flux and we're managing that state of flux and also helping other people manage it. This gets really hard, and we are not diligent about keeping track of it, because this is 100% a prefrontal cortex exercise. And if we're in a sort of in a log jam of change and flux, no matter how hard we try, our brain keeps rolling back to that limbic system. So the Eisenhower matrix is a great tool to use to help keep you in that sort of prefrontal cortex and being logical about how you're managing your time. The number one stressor when you're managing change, the number one stressor is running out of time. Because no matter how hard you try, no matter how good you are at managing change, there's at least one aspect of every project you work on where you run out of time. And that feels so gross because it is the antithesis of good project management and good change management. And so you're like, well, I failed. No, you're not failing. You're learning all the time. You're learning. And the Michael Jordan quote that goes something like, not direct quote, but I never lost a game. I simply ran out of time. Right. And so that is a much healthier way to think about how you manage time, and giving yourself a little bit of grace around that. Always something will fall. And so if you just plan for that, make it the plan, not the enemy, then you have a better opportunity to do well. And this tool will help you with that. So Does everybody know that this is called the Eisenhower Matrix and that President Eisenhower created this when he first, well, I don't know, however many moments after he got in office, couple months, he was so busy and frazzled and there's so much stuff coming at him all the time. He created this matrix to help him on the daily know what he needed to pay attention to and when. So there you go, a little piece of history trivia for you. So things that you have to do today, they're important and urgent. Client calls, my system's broken. Okay, we got to fix that right now. As really good change leaders and managers, the trap we fall into is doing all of the do ourselves. Especially if you've grown within an organization or within a specific role in a certain industry and you've done the work before, you think, I can do this myself faster and fix it better than if I hand it off to someone. And you know what? You're probably right, but you don't have time for that. And you're in a different role. So the hardest part about the do box is making sure that someone else does the do's that you're not supposed to be doing. And that I just want to say, that ties back into that accountability loop, that own piece. So there's recognize and then there's own. We quite often at the level you're operating in your careers, we own things we're not supposed to for other people because we assume they can't do it. Assume they can't do it maybe because they've proven in the past that they might not be able to do it, but we have to let them try and we have to support that team, or that team can never support us as leaders. So there's pieces of this Eisenhower matrix that tie back into the accountability loop, especially around ownership. So if you're having a hard time knowing where to park things in here, maybe just take those things, the ones that you're having a hard time with, pull those out and say, what aspects of this specific task, project, situation, whatever it is, do I actually own? So if Julie and Nancy are not communicating well together, what do I own in that? Emotionally, I don't have to own the whole thing, which is what my brain's trying to do. From a business perspective, I own this one tiny piece where they have to talk for an hour together and give me an answer about a solution. And that's what I own. That's my job, is to get that out of there. And in the meantime, hopefully you can manipulate them for their own good and help them feel a little bit better about the situation. But if right now your job is not to worry about that or own that, well, then don't. And that's hard. I say it to you like it's easy. It's not. Schedule. Just kidding. I'm going to go down instead of sideways. Delegate. So urgent, not important. So these are also things that you don't necessarily need to do. And when I say not important, or when this says not important, it doesn't mean it's not important to you. It means it's not important that you do it, right? So can I delegate this to someone else? Is, whatever, the Secretary of State is a better person to do this than I. So I'm going to send that off to them. So the delegate is not important for me to do it, but it is urgent that it get, it's urgent. It's important that it gets done. And then there's the eliminate, stop doing these things. So not urgent, not important. These are time fillers. And some people would say this is a time suck, and it allows you to be ineffective. And that is true. What I will say though, is life is a little different now than it used to be when Dwight Eisenhower was the president. And people are actually probably overtaxed and too busy. Like your brain is too busy in your work life and in your personal life. So what I say about this box is, yeah, you don't want to be wasting your time and screwing off at work. However, it is important to take breaks and allow your brain a break. There's a lot of psychological studies out now that the brain processes information best at 20-minute chunks at a time. 20 minutes, 5-minute break, 20 minutes, 5-minute break. Are you going to structure your life like that? Absolutely not, because you don't have time to do that. But I just want to say that to make the point that don't scold yourself for needing a break. So if you find yourself on your computer and pretty soon you're, you get an email that says there's a sale at Land's End and you really want to know if they have your favorite sweater, well, geez, if you spend 5 minutes doing that, don't be like, oh my gosh, because probably you've spent 10 hours working that day and 5 hours worrying and 3 hours supporting other people. And do you sleep? Maybe, probably not much. So allowing yourself intentional time for breaks is an important part of being successful, especially if you're a change leader. You are carrying around the weight of other people's deepest fears, not like spiders and snakes, but truly change is really one of people's greatest fears. And you're carrying the weight of that on your shoulders and managing it every day, in addition to doing your job. So give yourself a little slack and make sure you're taking breaks on purpose. Like lunch. Lunch is important. Yes, Joel.
So a little different twist on this eliminate thing, kind of resonating with what you were talking about with scheduling and delegating is and we do think in terms of waste as the things that aren't focused on work. But the point that I see here also is that there's many things associated with work that are time wasters. They are the things that we should eliminate. They come to us, but they're not our thing. We're not the accountable, responsible person. We don't have someone to delegate it to or to schedule it to do later, and we sure don't need to do it right now. We need to eliminate it. It's kind of like the purging of the email inbox. It's like, toss it, get rid of it. You're exactly right about take the breaks, the mental breaks, the walk around kind of thing and all like that, and don't get so consumed. But there's just a lot of nonsense that goes on that is dressed up and disguised like real work. And we can do that to ourselves. It's not necessarily somebody else doing it, but we can create all this motion and activity within our own processing of stuff that we gladly put in those other three quadrants. And really, we should just eliminate it. It's not productive. It's not effective. It's not something that we own. And so that's a big part of the change process, is being able to identify those things and move them away. So I've had a goal of clearing my desk for years. And if you walk in my office today, my desk, as well as my credenza, are cleared of all but 2 sheets of paper. And it has taken a lot of effort to get to the point, because my stacks were all for some purpose in one of the other 3 quadrants. But in reality, last week, my garbage can, was the beneficiary of a lot of paper, actually the recycle can. So this is hard. It is a hard thing to accomplish, because it feels like it is something that just has to be done. That we have to do it. But when you take all of what you've been talking about and we step back, there's just some of the things, and I won't say a lot of things, but some of the things we just need to eliminate, because there is something more important. And something more important may be taking lunch, just walking out, getting out of what. That may be more important than whatever the freaking emergency is that somebody else has presented to us that has nothing to do with, what we can accomplish.
Yes, you're absolutely right. If you're really bad at that, doing busy work, Rachel and I call that being productive, not effective. So you're still doing something and it's still work related, but it's not really effective. You're not pushing the ball any further down the field. The best thing I've found, because I'm excellent at that helps me is to have an accountability partner. So if I'm working on something and I think, I mean, you don't have to go talk to that person all the time, but if Missy's my accountability partner and I think, if Missy walked in here right now, would she be like, why are you working on that? And if I can answer that and go, yeah, she would, then probably I don't need to be doing it. So thinking about that is helpful in that way. So the last one is the scheduling, not urgent, but important. And these are the things we really ignore a lot. We ignore these a lot because we like putting out fires, because that's, even if it's stressful, it's fun. And you have to do it, even if it's not fun, it has to happen. We're not good at delegating things, so we end up doing a lot of these things in this bucket. So we're so focused over here, we fry out and start doing things here too often, or in a not productive or healthy way, and then we completely ignore this. So like, you got an employee who maybe isn't that great at their job, but it's because they're young and maybe they don't really communicate well with people, and maybe they came from a different industry, but man, you can see the fire in their eyes. They absolutely have it. And it's your job to get it out of them. But if you don't take the time to do those kinds of things, so mentor new employees, have hard conversations with other people, evaluate your own performance, evaluate your own health and mental health, and how are you showing up for work and supporting your team. If you don't do those things, then you just spend your time doing this, then you spend way more time than you're supposed to here. So this is a great tool when you're feeling frazzled. Great tool to force yourself to sit down with those piles of papers. I do the same thing too. I'm like, okay, no, we're going to go through these. Do I need any of this? And almost all the time, 90% of it, 99% of it, I throw away. So helps you refocus on what's important.
I'll add a thing that's really helped me in this area. Sorry to be in the way of our break. Is to ask, am I the only person that can do this? Because if I've got 15 things on my to-do list, or what I think is my to-do list, and it's like 2 of them are something that only I can do, whether it's permissions things and expertise things or whatever it is, and it has a deadline of some kind, probably need to prioritize those things. I used to ask myself, who's the best person to get this thing done? But that usually led me to doing more than I thought, or waiting for one person who could do a thing, when really, if it just needs to be done, other people can do that. That has helped me delegate a good bit. And also asking myself the question I've got on my board, how do I focus more of my time in the areas where I can uniquely bring the most value? Because if I can bring the most value to certain areas, that's probably where I need to be focusing my time. So those are a couple of things that have also helped me with this, which I hope to continue to be a good learner and grower in this area, because I struggle with it myself.
Listen to all that reflection. Okay, we do have a break scheduled. I want to show you, before we take our break, I just quickly want to show you what we have left to do, which is kind of a lot. So is this supposed to be the last session? Okay.
Yes, I believe so. I was fixing to ask you to confirm myself, but I think this is indeed, this is the one we rescheduled due to the conflict. And so we just kind of shuffled, but I do believe it's the last one.
Yeah, so we'll get through as much of this as we can today. If we don't get through everything and you think, gosh, we really should talk through this stuff, we'll just schedule just another hour or 2 hours if you're up for it. I mean, you're done. You're rid of me after today, if you so choose. So, okay. So start, stop, change. I want to go through these 4 values that we put together. The question is, how do we get better at this stuff? So start, stop, change, add. And then in those 4 different areas, I thought we'd do that in breakout sessions so we can have a couple really good discussions, come back together and build out what those look like. breakout, see, I said. And then working through the rocks and anchors. So this is what you guys did with Heather when she and Rachel were with you in person. And so I think maybe we are clearly not going to cover all this today, but I think maybe the best thing would be to pick out the few that we really need to talk through and figure out, what are the big rocks that we keep hitting with the sailboat, and what are our anchors, what's dragging behind us and holding us back from being successful. So maybe we'll pick out the few that are really big ones. Again, I thought a breakout would be the best way to do this, so we can capture more conversation and then come back together as a group. And then it's just recap. So there's not a lot of slides, but I think there's a lot of work to do. So we'll see how far we get. So let's take a break and get ready for this next section. So 9:37, what time is it there? 11:37. So 47 of whatever hour you're in.
Thanks, Meg.
Zoom recording. Okay, so what our goal is here, I included this picture to help emphasize the goal. The goal is to outline what do we want to start doing, stop doing, change, or add to what we're doing, so that we don't see these faces when we talk about these values, right? So when somebody says, we need to be better at trust, and then everybody goes, oh yeah, okay, let's talk about that. So let's talk about that. And what do we want to build in as good aspects of these areas? Maybe focus on things that we aren't good at McLeod. I know there's a bit of a difference between what we're good at in this team and what maybe we're good at within McLeod Global. So I guess my question would be, do we want to focus more on this team, or do we want to focus on what do we need to be better at within McLeod?
My 2 cents are, if we focus on this team, it's a little more bite-sized and a little more applicable to us. And if this team starts doing it, we'll naturally do better ways, but that's my 2 cents.
That was my thought too.
Okay, so what do we want to be? How do we want to be better at these things as a team? I think maybe when you do your breakout sessions, just come up with a list of 3 or 4, how do we be better at trust? And maybe right now we don't do X and we should do X or Y. And you guys have whatever conversations you need to. I'm providing guidance because sometimes with these abstract concepts, you get in the breakout room and you're like, what are we supposed to do again? So I would focus on 2 or 3 bullet points, if you will, or topics or themes around for each of these. How do we want to get better at them? So what are we doing currently? What do we wish we were doing different or better? Or could be, what are we doing and need to stop doing so we can be better at this? Does that make sense for this list? Some amount of sense? Okay. Take a screenshot, because I don't have anywhere to share this dang slide with you without you taking a snippet of it. I'm just going to put you in random breakout rooms, so don't be worried or offended based on who I put you in there with. Breakout rooms. Sign. Okay. Create. I have to talk myself through this. Thank you for just listening to me. Okay, away you go. Let's do we'll do 10 minutes in this breakout room. Does that seem like enough time, or do you want more? Do you want 15 minutes? 10 is good? Okay. Resume recording. I'm going to take notes while we're visiting here. So I'll just share this screen. You can see my notes. Okay, who wants to talk first and about what? Rick does. I can see it.
Sure. Why not? I think we got through a bunch of starts for each category. We didn't get through a bunch of, we didn't get through many stop, change, or ads. Although we kind of feel like it kind of crosses all categories to a degree. For trust, and it's kind of something that we do have in place, but it's kind of reinforcing it as well. Just making sure that we all have that safe space and feeling with each other when we come to a meeting, to be able to be open and honest with ourselves and with each other, and take that feedback as constructive and not destructive. Kind of checking defensiveness at the door and being open to others' opinions, observations, things of that sort.
Okay.
For the strategic vision, keeping it more in front of our, I guess that's a start. Keeping it more in front of our managers and people. Just for buy-in and continual awareness, and connect the team to the vision, being able to connect individuals to that vision. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Did you say pain or
connect the team?
Team.
No, hopefully not pain. Maybe it is pain for some.
Probably. Okay, connect team and individuals to vision. Okay, got it.
For alignment, it was because in ECS we're kind of contained, right? We're in our own ecosphere, and it is all under Joel. So for us, alignment is relatively easy in that regard. I think some of the bigger questions is how do we align across the entire company, and what is the company's true strategic vision? I think there was some batting back and forth about whether or not we've ever heard that. And by heard that, I mean from Tom.
I can type, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'd say that's good. So we can align globally.
Yeah, okay, I'll leave it there. Good job.
Okay. And then I was in the middle of my eloquent accountability speech when we came back. So.
Oh, well, let's hear it. Please do finish.
Well, no,
Accountability is my most favorite topic.
I'm just kidding. There was no eloquent speech. That's not what I do. I'm too blunt, so there's no eloquence.
No eloquence. Well,
Accountability. We were more, accountability is, well, a lot of these roll up into each other, right? And so the accountability, to me, really plays a lot into the trust factor, right? So if we're being open and honest and accountable, then we're opening ourselves up to being held accountable. And so we've got, my opinion is that's just kind of how it should work. And then we came back here.
We kind of talked about two of Tom's tenets impact really all these things, and that is if you focus on a greater good, right, which is our strategic vision. What's our greater good? McLeod Software's ultimate mission, vision, and then do what you say you're going to do. Do what you are going to do, what you say, and say what you do, which builds trust, right, in terms of behavior and actions. Those are pretty powerful. It's a part, like Rick said, is a part of all this.
So nothing real start, stop, change, or add there. Okay. We just kind of started that discussion.
okay. Okay, great. How about the other group? What did you all come up with?
Well, I feel like I don't have good trust right now because I feel like Rick's group was listening into our group.
Creepy.
So we said some of the same things. On trust, we talked about making sure that everybody is included. So not having comments about another group that might be negative, not having things that part of the group knows about and part doesn't. So making sure that we give good context and background. Am I going too fast, Meg? I'm sorry.
Nope, I'm with you.
I'm a listy person, so I just spit out my list and then I'm done. I'm like Rick, just the facts now. And then start having accountability for the end result, not blaming other groups. And like Rick said, some of these they all bleed into each other. So you could put that one under accountability or trust. Then
Say that one again for me though, Claudette. How did you
Sorry?
phrase it? How did you phrase that one? Start having
accountability for the end result and not blaming other groups. So, well, I tried to get that for you, but that group over there, they're holding me up. Right. So we're one company in the customer's eyes. They don't care what group is holding it up or who's not doing their thing. It's that end result in the customer perspective that we all have to be accountable for.
Okay.
Then on unified strategic vision, we said, kind of like the other group, get one and communicate it to everybody, and then follow that consistently. So don't go, have a few priorities out of that strategic vision that are action items, and let's all focus on those same things until they're done or there's good enough progress to start some others. And then once we have the vision and then the prioritized action items, add measurable goals for how I help that as an individual. How do I make that happen? And we had a little story about busboy in a restaurant who was like just really busting it and doing great. And somebody asked him, why are you so cheerful in this rush? And why are you doing this menial job so extremely well? And his answer was, I'm making this restaurant make money. Well, how are you doing that? I turn these tables over really fast and I do it with a great attitude. It makes people want to come back and we get more business. So being able to tie every job to the strategic objectives. Same thing for the alignment is really tied to that, getting the individual and team goals tied to the strategic success. So we're all working for the same thing. And then lastly, on accountability, if you can't do something, define it. Why can't you do it? Is it a capacity issue? Is it you don't have enough information? Is it, you know, whatever the roadblock is, don't just say I can't, oh, I couldn't do that, or you know, I didn't get that done. Well, why not? And how do we resolve that or reprioritize it? Like if there's this big roadblock, does it still matter? Should we still pursue it now that it's going to be more effort, or do we need to go another direction?
Okay.
Guys, that pretty much sum it up. What did I miss?
I don't think you missed anything. I'll just say the inverse of one of the things you said, where make sure all parties are included and give context. This is on the trust. This is a stop. And for this is, I feel really convicted about this anyway, but stop making kind of snide comments. I feel like we do a good job of not doing that for those in the room, but we don't necessarily do as good. I don't do as well as I should about other departments. So I don't think we do it for those in our meetings. It's really easy to do it and even kind of commiserate about, oh yeah, if this other group did that thing, but they'll never do that. That erodes our own trust in kind of our coworkers. So that's a stop, at least for me.
That is a tall order. I have been responsible for that several times in my career, where I'm supposed to be in charge of like stopping all the drama. And man, truck drivers especially, they're a dramatic bunch. They fancy themselves, you know, really hard and I don't like drama. I'm like, yeah, unless you're making it, don't even start with me. Shut your trap. Oof. Okay, this is great. Do you want to add any starts or stops or change your ads to what we've got here? I would guess if you really pushed yourselves, you probably have a few stops to add in here. Is it big enough? Here, I can make it big.
Yeah, we kind of stated them differently. A couple of the stops we talked about were, so no secret stuff, no side conversations. And the inverse of that is the start making sure everyone's included. And it's kind of a repeat, but kind of stop the us versus them mentality, which we've made a lot of progress in that. We really have. I think everyone would, to some degree, feel an effect of that.
Who's the us and who's the them?
I mean, it could be sales versus operations. It could be ops versus product, sales versus product. I mean, any in particular. You know, I think one good improvement we've seen in the past few years, Wes, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the ECS versus core, it's all delivery. And there's been a lot of improvement in that area.
Do you remember the movie Office Space, where the guy came up with a new game? It was called Jump to Conclusions.
Oh yes.
I think I'm guilty of it a lot. I try to figure out like what's intent, what's going on here, and I jump to conclusions without having complete information. And I don't have data. I've got anecdotes, and I just form my own opinion about what's going on without knowing. And I jump to conclusions, make assumptions, and that drives dysfunctional and unhealthy, destructive behaviors.
So for unified strategic vision, what I think needs to go in here as a stop is stop accepting that you don't have one. Somebody's got to drive that. And quite often behavior is not what you intend, it's what you allow. And so whoever is responsible for said strategic vision and isn't sharing it is not being held accountable to sharing it or having one and sharing it and being consistent with it. So that probably could be in both unified strategic vision and then some part in some way in accountability. Of course, this isn't my list, so that's just my suggestion. What do you guys think about that? Bruce is giving the thumbs up. Sean's nodding his head. Anybody else? I mean, Joel's nodding his head. 3.
Well,
Getting closer to a majority.
We when in our side group, we talked about the vision and the overarching vision of the company as a whole, and then ECS, and we really talked about what is our vision within ECS as a base to focusing there versus I'd say a vision that doesn't necessarily come from the corporation as a whole. Be Tom has his tenants, and Tom has from a core perspective, over the last almost a year now, 10 months or whatever it is it is focused on that white glove, that very high level of service. And he in a lot of meetings talked about that, and for me that became the vision. The vision is, if we're not working towards that, we're doing the wrong things. And I think being part of ECS, there definitely are a vision of what we need to do. Again, that's where we kind of stepped in, making sure that we share that vision and make sure things lead towards that as we work with everybody underneath us and in us being in meetings together. So I take what you're saying, Meg, is that there is a vision as a whole. We're just not holding the people accountable to above us to make sure that we have that goal. Or are you saying there is a goal there and we just start needing to put it out there and start living by it? I guess maybe I'm a little confused as to what you're driving at.
So greater, do what's best, or we want to make a greater good, and then do what you say you're going to do, stand behind kind of the handshake principle. Do what you say you're going to do, what you're going to shake on. Those are great theories about how to have a successful business. But if I think about putting that on someone's performance evaluation, and saying, okay, Rick, did you do everything you said you were going to do? Rick's answer is very quickly going to be no, because I don't have time actually to get all that done, and this happened and that happened. And I just want to say there's a little bit of truth in every excuse we have, right? So and like I said earlier, something will always sort of slip off the edge of the plate. So holding people to a sort of this theory of greater good and do what you say you're going to do does not very cleanly translate to business efficiency and actual business strategy. So what I would say is that those ideas, those concepts need to be translated into, what does that mean if my job is fill in the blank role? From a tactical perspective, depending on what kind of role you're in, if it's tactical, and then an operational perspective, and then a strategic perspective, what do I have to do to be successful? Because if you put people in a position, if you've got really good employees by and large, and they really want to do their best work, they're going to do whatever they think is their best job, but they might be focusing on things that aren't actually effective. They're just productive, good, busy work. So I think probably a lot of the challenge with this strategic vision and the idea of alignment is you've got some people who are like, I'm busy all the time, so I'm doing everything I can to make this a greater place or to provide greater service to our clients. And who's going to tell them no? No one, because they are trying as hard as they can try. So conceptually, I think those ideas are great. I think they need to be sort of boiled down into something that's digestible for the organization, so that you guys have something to hold people accountable. And to Claudette's point in the conversation you all had is, we have to be able to measure this. How do you measure? If you say, Meg, did you do everything you said you were going to do? Yeah, I think I'm about 85% there. Okay. Like, it's hard to measure, and you can't move what you can't measure. So that's what I mean when I say, I think what you need to stop allowing is this idea of, well, we just want to be better, like make the world a better place. Yeah, that's awesome. How are we going to do that? How do we hold our people accountable to that? And so perhaps Tom has given you the message, and that's good. And the responsibility falls on the shoulders of the people who report to Tom directly, or maybe the people under them, to define what does that mean for my department specifically, and how do I support my people? I'm just going to put it on here, and I'm going to say this is Meg's note, and you guys can chew on that a little bit.
My 2 cents is, I guess what I'm hearing is, yeah, Tom hasn't said, here's the strategic vision, here's the sentence, here's the statement, or whatever it is. Even if he did, I don't know that we have the measurements to get there. And maybe, I don't know if there's a fear of getting it wrong, but I feel like if we say, okay, well, we know Tom's tenets, those are like the business tenets. That's a little different than a vision. If we say, hey, I believe that my team will effectively help the restaurant by bussing tables fast and with a good attitude. That's kind of the way to say, okay, this is the measurable way in which I help the restaurant with, it's full, it's busy, it's profitable, everyone enjoys their experience. I think we have to start doing that on a team level in our own way. And if it's wrong, we'll be told it's wrong, right? I mean, if the measurements are, well, we're fine if we answer support calls within a year. Okay, well, we'll be told that's wrong, but that's a way that we can apply that, I think, to both our individual selves and us as a group. Like I said, if it's wrong, it'll be corrected. And if it's right, it'll catch on.
I agree. I think that it's a little bit, it's like the escalator thing, right? Like, okay, we can't sit around and just say, because we don't have a unified vision, or we don't have this, the tablet coming down from on high, that we can't do anything. We all know what's going on in our areas that contributes to what we need to do for our customers and McLeod, right? So in even in lieu of having all of that, we can execute day to day with our people and with each other to make sure that everybody understands the dynamic and the variables that we're working with and all of that, and that we're not making assumptions about each other and each other's areas, and that we are trying to do our best to take care of what we need to take care of. And we're all professionals, we've been doing this for a long time. It's not easy to do, but we got to work together to get it done. And that takes communication, collaboration. So all that can be going on even without having that. But yeah, ideally, you'd like to say, here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to get there, and here's how y'all can help us get there. But if we work at a local level, we ought to be at least moving the ball down the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, authority is a funny thing in an organization. So you can have the authority over the people in your own area, team. But if you don't have the support from above you, and I'm not insinuating that you're not supported. Just an example of, if you say, well, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then someone from your team says, well, I don't really want to do Y. And they talk to someone up here and said, and then the person says, I wouldn't want to do Y either. Why are you doing Y? Mark said. Well, Mark's wrong. And so authority, I mean, you have the authority and the responsibility to manage your own teams. Absolutely. It helps when you have that additional support of the message that's from, that comes from above too. So that alignment piece is, yes, absolutely. Start within your division or your department, within your teams, and then make sure that you build up here in terms of alignment, in addition to over here and down this way. It's got to go, it has to push in all directions. Because boy, those are bad bear traps to get stuck in. And that hurts. And that can really destroy credibility on a team. And especially where you guys have gotten quite a ways down the road within your team about trusting each other and working well together and really being intentional about this alignment piece. You don't want to be hamstrung by people in the organization. So as you're building this out organically, which is, I agree with you, the rightest way you can do it, because this is a big ship to swing, right? We're kind of going, not 180 degrees, and maybe it's only, 45 degrees different than the direction, not the direction of the company, but the essence of the company. Now, how do we get to greater good effectively together? That's still a big ship to swing. So you want to make sure that you're creating buy-in across all different aspects of the business. Okay, good. We don't have a stop in accountability, not that we have to have one, but is there anything you would like to stop doing as a team so you focus more on doing the right things as when it comes to accountability?
One of the things that I'm trying to stop is stop allowing people to give me things without a deadline, so that I know when it needs to do. So people are like, hey, I need you to do this. Okay, so can you tell me when this needs to happen? Because I need to know if I need to rearrange my day or if next week is fine. Or so by proactively asking, I will also tell you, because we're cultivating trust here, on the times when I don't ask this, it's probably strategic because I don't actually want to get it done. So if you're going to do it, you have to really do it. But that's a stop for me.
That's a good one. All right. Any change or adds? This is a pretty good list.
As a bold statement, but stop the insanity. And by that, I mean, stop doing things the same way. It's the true definition of insanity, expecting different results. Like, we have to think outside the box sometimes. I was putting that under accountability.
Okay.
But you can put it wherever you wish.
I wish to put it where you want it. Stop.
One of the things that strikes me as I listen to the discussion from the breakout room, and this is a great list that I want us to print out and remind each other about, and to that degree of accountability, as it were. But as we're talking here as leaders, we have been discussing a big change process, big swings, where we need big things happening, and our company is facing a number of big things right now. I mean, pretty much at every level, product level, operations level, challenges from the size we are, challenges with coming off two of the best year, actually the two best years in the history of the company, but wondering, what's going to happen in the market this year. And so there's big things that are going on, big change management issues. But then there's also the fact that leadership and management in a dynamic organization is never ending. Some of these things can become anchors and concrete for us that we use as stability, but we have to constantly keep coming back to refreshing ourselves with what Heidi just said. Don't keep doing the same old thing expecting a different result. Okay, we can't adopt, we've got through the change process, now we got it fixed. Okay, this is what we're going to do, and we just keep doing that. But every now and then we got to reevaluate and reassess and say, okay, wait a minute, do we need to change that we changed in order to get a different, better result? We got to be testing against it. We got to be, and so we've got to be comfortable with a constant state of change, realizing that it's micro evolution versus macro evolution, to use a couple of terms there, and be comfortable with that. I know that from the very beginning, and I'm going to take a few of these last few minutes here, Meg, and I apologize, but I think it's significant that, one of the things that struck me when I first started talking with Rachel and talking about independence, I think in one of the first groups that we met with, she said, yeah, Joel's one of these guys that'll just go out and create chaos if there's not any, because he's an independent. And that resonated with me, and with things that some of this group have actually told me in feedback over time, that I'm a change agent in that I go force change. If I don't see something getting accomplished, I go throw something different into it. And so I've gotten more mindful of that myself because of my culture type. And it's not that that's all wrong, because we've got to be in this micro sense of tuning. This change that I'm talking about is tuning, fine tuning. I remember the day when a car radio, you played with the dial to get it just right tuned in. Now we got digital dials on everything, TV and radios and everything. There's no fine tuning. But we've got to be fine tuning what we're trying to do. And that is a constant state of change, not the big swings like I was just referring to that I tended to throw in. So that's an adaptation for me to be making in leading the ECS team, for sure. But we've got to be comfortable with constant review, constant change, constant improving as a good thing, because that is what a living, dynamic organization is going to be and do. So.
Slow clap for Joel.
I think, Joel, that's exactly right. We have to be adaptable, because things are always changing, right, all around us in the marketplace and inside McLeod. And it's on us to make all that change and chaos and all of that workable and digestible and achievable towards our goal with our people. Because, like you say, change is coming. There's nothing we can do about it. So we got to adapt to it, and we got to get our people to adapt to it. And that brings in all this other stuff that Meg's been talking about, and tools that we can use. So we got to be really good at that to be able to get where we need to go amongst all that change. So I agree.
And I think adding to that, on the vision side, one of the things we need to do is add in that that thought process and that goal that we are going to, that change management and changing for the sake of good is somewhat of a constant, that we can't rest on our laurels and create a process that we hold to 5 years from now, saying that this is the only way to do it. And to drive that, to make it comfortable and not make it scary and painful.
Okay, here's what I put. I added this under the unified strategic vision. Start. Being prepared to drive healthy change, be ready to take on that challenge and support others in it. Did I capture the essence of your point, Thorny?
I think so.
Okay, well, you can change it if I didn't. Okay, well, we have 10 minutes left, which is not enough time to really do much of anything that we have left. So, we can kick the rocks and anchors conversation out, or we can plan some more time to meet. I'm happy to do whatever feels good to you guys, and you can talk amongst yourselves if you so choose, and let me know what you want to do. I don't care either way. I'm in no hurry to schedule it, but if you want to schedule another 90 minutes probably to go over that stuff and really get get kind of airtight and clear on some of those rocks and anchors, then let's do it. And if you want to talk about it, Joel can just let me know.
I think we should talk about it and then get back with you, because we can always schedule something, but I want to get the chance to hear from the team, and we had a few members that weren't with us today, so I do think there's some things still hanging out there like you've got on your list to discuss, but I think digesting what we just went through and getting it into action would be really worthwhile. That's my thought.
Well, I will be happy to give you the time to have those conversations and think about that. I will, though, or I would like to share my couple of closing screens, because I think, well, because I made them and I want to share them with you. And they, it's the ribbon in the hair. So let's do it. Okay, so considerations for future us, and these are just bits and pieces of what we've talked about the last couple times we've met. I think the best way, I guess, that makes sense for my brain, this might not translate directly for everyone, but I think that when I think about seeing other people going through change and how do I help them the best, we are tasked with understanding where they're at, and we've talked a lot about that. So the question that always comes to my mind is, what does freedom look like to them? What does good look like? What does good feel like for that person? What feels like, man, this is better. This is making my life better. Whether they're a client, whether they're a colleague, whether they work directly under you, shoot, even if it's the, checker at the grocery store. Like my family's like, you're weird. Why are you so nice to people? I said, why not be nice to people? I mean, what does it hurt? It doesn't hurt anything. So always thinking about what does freedom's the word for me. I mean, I have a tattoo of the word freedom in Old Ogham. So freedom is my word. Fill that in with whatever word you want, different than that. Freedom, or good, or comfortable, happy, whatever good word you want to associate with that. How do we manage the expectations then once we find out what they are, or if we kind of suspect what they are? How do we manage that? And sometimes that's a scream into a pillow, because what they need and what you want to do are two very different things. And so knowing that you need to give yourself the space and grace to manage other people's expectations effectively, when it maybe isn't that great or fun for you. Give yourself the time and space to honor that it's not that fun for you. Historically, there's a real sense of pride in pain, especially in America. So, and I'm totally cool with that. But in this world of being very fine-tuned, to use Joel's words, I mean, the fine-tuning is not manual anymore. It's already done for you. So people don't understand pain, and we don't identify with it in the way the loyalist generation did. So I would encourage you to take it a little easy on yourself, and make sure that you're giving yourself the right tools and time to be able to be responsive to other people's expectations. Accountability escalator, how do we get stuck on it, and how do we get off of it? Or like Joel said, if it's throwing you off, how do you hold on for dear life? Using that accountability model helps a lot with that. Also, the ladder of inference is another great tool. And can we really manage conflict better with kindness? Yeah, you can. I don't like to have to say it because it's really fun for me to be catty, and I'm good at it. Man, I am so good at it. But it just doesn't serve us as human beings. We do not engage with each other well in that way. So don't waste your time, I guess, is my message there. Kill them with kindness, as Grandma O'Sullivan would say. God rest her crabby soul. Okay, and then what's next? So recognize those people who are overwhelmed. Watch for those nonverbal cues. Listen for those verbal cues in intonation and the words that they use. Remember that you are different from people around you. And I don't just mean sort of different, I mean way different. And that's just talking about the culture type aspect. So what really does make sense to you really doesn't make sense to some other people, and how you prioritize for success. So if you feel yourself getting really overwhelmed by someone's perspective, just take a beat. You'll probably pretty quickly figure it out now that you've learned some of these new things. How are you making other people crazy? And for heaven's sakes, be honest with yourself. If you're making people crazy, you are. And that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you've got to try a different approach. Having a plan is always a better way to get people on board, even chaos tolerant people. So even Joel, as an example, if you go to him and say, hey, let's do the blah, blah thing. If you have no plan, the first thing he's going to say is, well, what's your plan? So a plan is always a better way to get people on board. That's one of those things that you should definitely take time, make time to do. Important, not urgent. Adjust procedures and processes. So that kind of that adaptable piece you all were just talking about. We have to adapt to our environment, and what we learned yesterday was good for us yesterday, and what we learn tomorrow will be good for us tomorrow. And we have to accept all that and be adaptable and nimble and move through time with what we've learned. And then make sure you use what you know about people to your advantage. So that's kind of that manipulation piece. Use whatever word you want that doesn't sound so terrible as manipulation, but frankly, it's all about emotional strategy. Using empathy as a tool, and how much should you use it based on what you know about those people. So it was really lovely to see you all again. I think the McLeod conference is definitely on our list of things to attend, and I have volunteered to go because I had a blast, because I'm a trucking nerd. So it was so much fun for me. So I hope I get to see all of your shiny faces sometime this fall. Winter? No, when was it? July.
September. In Phoenix.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I'm definitely coming. It's going to be hot.
We'll be inside.
Okay.
Heidi will be so miserable.
Well, Phoenix will probably feel better for you guys in September than, right? Because there's no humidity really. No, it doesn't feel better. No, don't love it. Okay.
I'm the only one that doesn't love heat, I think.
Oh, it's hot. Doesn't matter where you're at.
That's right. Hot is hot.
I do agree with that. I had a girlfriend who lived in Virginia most of her life, and she's like, you just don't understand, the humidity is so hot. I'm like, you clearly haven't done a lot of outside physical labor. I'm like, you go move a whole trailer full of, irrigation pipe when it's 80 degrees. I don't care if the humidity is 110 or 5. You're hot. That's hard work. All right, lovely. Well, Brett will be sending you all the resources that we've talked through in these last couple sessions. If there's anything else you need from us, let me know. And Joel, I'll just wait to hear from you on maybe meeting up again to cover the rocks and
Okay.
anchors, or whatever you guys think is helpful that we haven't quite covered. You just let me know.
Yep. Thanks for everything, Meg. It's been great.
Thanks,
All
Meg.
right.
Thanks, Meg.
Yeah, you guys take care.
Thanks,
You too.
everybody.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you. You too.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bye.